State Department, and others. And I can tell you, having worked on a counter-sniper team, having worked on an advanced team, that there are critical failures that need to be identified so that the American people can understand the transparency of it, but also to raise the questions and awarenesses of why. That is the intent of this entire hearing, is to get to the why, get to those who are responsible, bearing in mind, responsibility and accountability are two very different things. This is not an I'm sorry, I'll resign, I'm finished. This is a get accountability to pursue either purposeful intent or criminal gross negligence. The questions that we have to ask is, why was a venue such as the one selected not having the adequate security? Why was the higher vantage points not covered? Why was there not a either comparable or compatible communications system or a joint operations center established? Where was the security plan, the comms plan, the data range cards? Where was the actual overwatch? Where was the ground teams as far as their rates of instruction? And what was the tactical techniques and procedures that were to be utilized that would identify and mitigate all the existing threats? I think that this is just the start as we continue to unpeel the layers and layers of why was there not an early morning briefing with all to ensure communications and last-minute security plans? Why was the surveillance drone not utilized, even though it was offered? And who ultimately is responsible and will be held accountable for one of the truly most life-changing incidents for a lot of us, where we almost lost the former president of the United States? I think that it's easy to see why an independent investigation is needed. I think that we understand that if this was to have been conducted correctly, then July 14th, we would have had immediate subpoena to get the security plans, comms plans, the motorcade operational plan, the actual counter-snipers range fan data cards, and started questioning the individuals independently to do corroborations of fact-fiction boards to see what's going on. But we hope with the continual failures within the federal government and the lack of transparency that's been provided to date, that this will help to be a benchmark of where we can move going forward to try and rebuild the confidence in your elected officials. That we will not hide behind low-level classifications, and that we will guarantee the transparency and accountability that the American people deserve. This panel that we have put together is also to acknowledge those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Today is August 26th, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our 13 fallen heroes in Afghanistan of August 26, 2021, and the sacrifice that's been made on behalf of a grateful nation. It's time for us to reflect on what the cost is of these freedoms, and I also want to acknowledge the service and the murder of Corey Competore, and let his family know that we are here, we are listening, and that we will get accountability. I want to thank our members that are here as well, and I want to just end with this. While this is the first hearing of its kind to come together, it won't be the last. And that this is a message to all of Congress, that if we are not selecting people based on meritocracy, that independent investigations such as this will continue to move forward, that there are members and conservatives who will not be silenced, and that we will continue to strive for accountability in government as well as for transparency for America. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my good friend and co-chair, the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming here today. Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah. Awesome. All right, I want to also acknowledge and thank my friend and colleague Bob Good for showing up today. It's been nearly a month and a half has passed since Matthew Crooks allegedly scaled a roof in plain sight with an AR-style rifle only 140 yards from where President Trump was standing. He was then able to fire off multiple rounds, tragically killing Corey Competore while hitting President Trump within an inch of his life. That's a month and a half with frustratingly few answers and even less accountability for those who had a duty to protect President Trump. Many of the excuses that we've heard from those in leadership sound like hollow and pathetic attempts to gaslight the American people. This is also why Rep. Biggs and I have recently introduced legislation that would require the surrender of all Secret Service records related to the events of that day to be released. As a former Navy SEAL sniper, it's evident to me that many basic security measures were completely dropped, making President Trump extremely vulnerable. There's simply no excuse. I want to say thank you to my colleagues and our subject matter experts for joining us today for this forum examining the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump. It's clear that there was a complete breakdown of the security forces on the ground in Butler on July 13th. Today we'll be examining how this breakdown in basic yet vital security measures nearly resulted in the assassination of former president and current nominee for the highest office in the land. After the last hearing with former Secret Service Director Cheadle, during which the House Oversight Committee received no substantive efforts, it's imperative that we continue to conduct oversight regarding the actions and failures that occurred on and surrounding July 13th. Accountability must be inescapable for those responsible. While coverage of the attempted assassination has all but disappeared from mainstream news outlets, we're committed to keeping our eye on the ball to ensure that this never happens again. I'd like to again thank our subject matter experts who are with us today for giving their time and their knowledge to help uncover the truth and bring all facts to light. Now I'd like to take some time to introduce each of these men and provide a brief summary of their relevant backgrounds and expertise. In addition to being a well-known political commentator, radio show host, and author, Dan Bongino is a former United States Secret Service special agent. In 2002, he left the New York field office to become an instructor at the Secret Service Training Academy in Beltsville, Maryland. In 2006, he was assigned to the Presidential Protection Division during George W. Bush's second term. He remained on protective duty after Barack Obama became president, leaving in May 2011. Mr. Bongino, thank you for being with us. Erik Prince is an American businessman, investor, and a former U.S. Navy SEAL. Hoo-yah. He is best known for founding the private military contractor Blackwater. Prince was commissioned as an officer in the United States Navy via Officer Candidate School in 1992. Prince graduated with Buds Class 188 in 1993. He deployed with SEAL Team 8 to Haiti, the Middle East, and the Balkans. Thank you for your time, sir. Mr. Ben Shaffer is currently an operator with Washington Regional SWAT, serving for nearly 7 years, and has served in critical military and law enforcement roles for over 20 years. Specifically, Schaefer has experience in canine handling with multiple deployments, developing training programs for the United States Marine Corps and other private security firms. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, for being here. These men are experts in the fields and professions incredibly relevant to the events of July 13th. I believe they'll be able to provide this forum and the American people with insights that have otherwise not been received and the attention they deserve. With that, I'll turn it over to our subject matter experts, beginning with Mr. Bongino for opening remarks.
Well, thanks for your time. Thank you for doing this. Sound okay? Everybody hear me back there? Yeah. Great, fantastic. Listen, let's just get right to the point. This was an apocalyptic security failure. A man was murdered in front of his family. 3 people were shot on live television, including President Trump, and the head who came within 2 millimeters of having his head explode on national television in front of millions of people. There's no sugarcoating it. It's no time for BS. Unfortunately, as Congressman Crane and Mills both indicated, the story seems to have been vanquished to the phantom zone of media coverage. It's amazing how we're still talking about JFK's assassination, but nobody seems to want to talk about President Trump being shot in the head on national television, despite the fact that we have no answers. So I have 5 minutes, so I want to keep it quick, and I want to make 3 points. I worked in the Secret Service for 12 years. I loved it. I worked with some really amazing men and women who gave everything. I mean, a couple of them literally gave everything. I know guys who've gotten bizarre diseases overseas, like chikungunya fever and protection operations. everybody gave a little bit of something in the Secret Service, and it was a real honor to say I was part of it. But they have three institutional problems, I believe, in the macro will help us get to the bottom of how this Secret Service apocalyptic failure won't happen again. First, they have a technology problem. The joke in the Secret Service, which is sadly no longer funny when I was there, and it wasn't funny then either, is they rely on yesterday's technology tomorrow. Think about that. Yesterday's technology tomorrow. Everything from computer systems that waste agents' times, filling out time and attendance records they were doing, to Congressman Crane and I discussing the fact that they only implemented slings, a technology as old as the wheel, about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into my time in the Secret Service, which is embarrassing. The weaponry was old, everything was old. These are things I would have talked about sooner if they didn't create a security crisis, and I obviously didn't want to air them publicly. Now you're seeing what happens when you don't have a drone up at a site you could have bought for $39.99 on Amazon. Second, another adage in the Secret Service, you've heard even the new acting director discuss, is the more with less approach. There is no more with less, there's less with less, okay? The Secret Service more with less approach only works if you produce more. That's how capitalism works. You produce a flat screen TV that was probably 20 years ago, $10,000, it's $200 at Walmart now. They produce a better TV with less. That's not what the Secret Service did. They produced less with more. They were given more money and produced less. A 20-year-old criminal outsmarted them on a $40 drone technology piece of device. You're telling me that's more with less? That's disgusting. That's nothing with less. That's less with more. Their budget went up. You guys know, you're appropriators. You know that. Third, and I'll wrap it up with this, turn it over to Mr. Prince. The investigative mission, the Secret Service, that they're telling you they need to make them better agents is total crap. That's garbage. Their agents are talented, smart people. They can figure out how to do protection without running out cheap $20 counterfeit notes at 7-Eleven on a Friday night while the president's getting shot in the head. How is it we have a DEA, we have an FBI, we have TIGTA, the IRS, CBP, and 1,000 other entities with a $6 trillion budget, which I know a lot of you have been fighting against this grotesque spending. $3 billion goes to the Secret Service, and we're wasting time running out counterfeit notes. It's a serious problem, counterfeiting. Granted, it might be a legacy item. They started doing counterfeiting. That's not what we do now. Get rid of the investigative mission, turn it over to other people, let them do what they do best and should do best. Protection. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for doing this. Thanks to the panelists as well and everyone attending. Appreciate it.
We're here today to discuss a tragedy for the United States of America that could have been the catalyst in the destruction of our republic. World War I started with botched diplomatic security. The assassination of one party's leading candidate a mere 4 months before the election, at minimum, would have unleashed unimaginable chaos and violence. The cancerous rot of unaccountability has metastasized throughout our entire body politic. Our obscene levels of government waste ooze like a gelatinous mold across society. Our borders, so porous they are reminiscent of a spring flood tide. The security apparatus suffers failure upon failure globally. Our enemies mocking us even while the permanent deep state has weaponized the justice system and delivers a Soviet style of lawfare. In the case of Butler, Pennsylvania, only the disinfectant of transparency and accountability will start to repair the cascading errors that led to the tragedy. In analyzing tragic events, Gray's laws come into effect. Insufficient advanced incompetence is indistinguishable from malice. The mission of this panel must be to provide a no-holds-barred analysis of all the shortcomings that piled up to enable Butler to occur. An op order for the next administration to correct decades of drift from excellence. I know how difficult high-threat executive protection work is. One must be prepared, coordinated, and lucky every day. The bad guy only has to get it right once. There is no question that a failure of coordination, communications, training, and leadership failed America in Pennsylvania with tragic results. I'm honored and happy to help ensure that will not happen again. I think, and especially as we think the anniversary of the debacle that was Afghanistan, the theme of no accountability across all our agencies rings true, because no one has been held accountable for anything in Afghanistan or anything since. And I think a corollary is, if we think back to the debacle that was Desert One, the attempted Iranian hostage rescue mission in 1979, ended terribly. 8 Americans dead, international embarrassment, didn't rescue the hostages. Congress took action, changed how the money is spent. Why? Because if you try to do a special operations mission, or if you're trying to do a protective mission while you're doing currency investigations, no, you can't serve two masters. They created the United States Special Operations Command to find the money and the personnel to focus on getting that mission correct. And if you think about it, the JSOC capability that the United States government has today is elegant and it's effective. And until you change the money issue and until you put people in charge that are serious about this business, we will continue to have the kind of embarrassments, both listed by Jason Chaffetz before, and we dodged a bullet. Donald J. Trump dodged a bullet. We cannot afford to have more of these.
Good morning. My name is Ben Shaffer. I'm a SWAT operator with Washington Regional SWAT Team that was tasked for presidential support on that day. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here today as you examine the assassination attempt on former President Donald J. Trump in Butler, PA. Before I begin, I feel compelled to also echo those condolences for all the victims that suffered that day and continue to suffer because of those tragedies. Since joining the Marine Corps in 2004, I have deployed, fought, and been recognized for exemplary service and performance in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've provided security services to the President of the United States and other high-ranking members in the United States government. I've protected diplomatic persons, high-net-worth corporate clients, media personalities, investigative journalists, and the general public. I continue that work today as a SWAT team leader and executive protection specialist. I have been recognized on numerous occasions for my high level of professionalism, proficiency, and knowledge of all security measures while working in those fields. As I analyze what happened in hindsight and real time on July 13th, there's a few points that I'd like to talk or mention that haven't sat well with me or I haven't been able to reason. Part of that is in the communication conversation of what happened that day and the abilities or lack thereof. The ability to communicate quicker between agencies is definitely a shortfall. That was not optimized in what we'd normally see in a presidential support mission. This all led to an obvious delay in communication when we were beginning to target and respond to the threat that was Mr. Crooks that day. The lack of coordination between tactical element leaders and the Secret Service left ground elements in the dark and prevented necessary time to prepare for specific venue considerations and needs prior to that event. All Overwatch, sniper, counter-sniper positions should have had direct communication with each other that day at that entire rally. Some of the technical difficulties that have already been mentioned that I'd like to echo is the lack of drone coverage or drone overwatch that day, which left many danger areas exposed and severely, and I say that again, severely, impacted the ability to secure the venue and the event itself. Other points of failure, other danger areas that have been noted, and I feel the need again to echo those, is the water tower that was located in the northeast section of the event. That's a major, if not catastrophic failure to not identify that is a elevated, optimal, and opportunistic place for anyone with any kind of knowledge to wreak havoc on that event. The tasks that day broken down included local law enforcement's responsibilities that include traffic, parking, and access were their primary roles. State law enforcement handled crowd control, medical support to those in need. Due to the temperature that day, there were a lot of heat casualties, a lot of heat strokes, a lot of heat stress-induced issues. The local counter-assault teams were to neutralize and mitigate any threat to the former president. Local SWAT counter-sniper teams were to scan and hunt for anyone deemed a deadly threat to any member of the crowd or the former president. In conclusion to what I have to say today, there's no question that there were critical failures during the Butler event. It is important that we learn how and why this security failure occurred so that we can better provide safety and security to those high-ranking officials and the general public in the future. I truly believe Americans deserve that. Thank you for your opportunity to testify before you today. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. This forum having come to order, I want to remind everyone that we will be going in 10-minute segments. Should there be a need to have a second round of questioning, we will then limit the second round of questioning to 5 minutes each. The first person who will start this out is the Honorable Andy Biggs.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for being here today. Appreciate it. I want to start, if we're ready, if the video is queued, I want to show a short video, if we're ready.
Stunning new video tonight showing the moment Donald Trump's would-be assassin climbed onto the roof of that building just 2 minutes before he opened fire.
Yeah, look, there he is.
You can hear bystanders desperately trying to alert police. Authorities now using that video as part of the investigation.
Walk us through what you were seeing in the minutes before the actual shooting happened.
Well, there was a lot of people around the building that were complaining about some guy crawling up the building and then crawling up the roof.
Gentlemen, so we're going to bring him up for Can we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. I'll get you up here. The world will see a vibrant Republican.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down, see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit over that short. That short's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that says
According to a former agent, Secret Service counter-sniper teams should have scoped out and advanced all those areas where there were potential threats beforehand and known what the line of sight to Trump could be.
The fact that somebody was able to get within 200 yards with a rifle and be on an exposed rooftop, be people there, be seen by where it should have been cameras and drones and many other things in place to watch for that, something broke down. That shooter with that rifle should have never been that close to the former president of the United States at a venue like this.
Thank you for showing that video. Appreciate that. And so we've seen aspects of those videos because those are public domain videos. One spectator was killed, and we express condolences to his family, Corey Comprador. 2 others were critically injured, David Dutch, James Copenhaver. And then narrowly escaping with his life was former President Trump. That's why we're here. And the timeline is probably too small for you to read, but I'm going to go over the timeline just briefly and with the experts here in just a second. But first, I want to acknowledge also our condolences to the 13 veterans killed in Afghanistan during that disastrous retreat. I also acknowledge our colleague Bob Good's presence today, his interest in this, appreciate his interest in this. Our former colleague Jason Chaffetz and Mark Morgan, we appreciate all of you being here today. So let's take a look at this from the local perspective. Ben, thank you for being here. Let's talk about the communications. Let's start there. Was there a central communications center in place?
Yes, there were. That was provided by the Butler Emergency Services Unit.
And typically, what, was the Secret Service, did they have a person on the scene, a decision maker on the scene in case an emergency happened?
I believe that there were a Secret Service agent responsible for the scene. However, they were not, to my knowledge, co-located at the command center itself.
And so I want to make clear. So who was present in the communications command center that might have made decisions for Secret Service?
Secret Service, on my understanding, is that the information that was gathered by the command center, which would have been being operated by the Butler Emergency Services Unit and the commander in that capacity. He was responsible for relaying that information to a point of contact he had, and my understanding was that it was over a cell phone as opposed to in-person communications.
Is that normal to have a cell phone communication, or is there usually a body there that can make a decision?
In most security postures and events that I've been part of for these types of events, there is someone actually physically co-located for that reason. Due to the loss of cell phone service, which we experienced that day, a possible loss of radio communications that day. It's a very robust and fail-proof way to communicate because of the level of importance that's needed.
Did you, let's put it this way, were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would have been some type of encrypted law enforcement style radio.
And do you know, did the Secret Service avail themselves of that? Did they obtain those radios?
I believe they were offered, but I do not believe they were taken.
So they did not utilize the preferred mechanisms of communication that was offered to them?
That's correct.
Let's talk timeline for a second. So if we look at this timeline, it indicates to us, I'm going to go 5:10, at 5:10 p.m., the shooter is identified as a suspicious person near the AGR building. Does that sound right to what you understand of the timeline?
Yes, sir.
And so at least some point, somebody had seen him by 5:10 p.m. That's an hour before the shooting. They adjudicated he was suspicious. And in testimony before the committees of Congress, they indicated to us that, when I say they, I'm talking Cheadle, Rowe, and Ray, the directors and interim directors of Secret Service and FBI. They indicated to us that there's a distinction between a suspicious person and a threat. And so you have a suspicious individual, you have a threat, there's an interim category as well. What's that interim category?
In our line of communications from a SWAT point of view and from a tactical point of view, our escalation of people that we encounter starts out as a suspicious person, then goes to a person of interest, and then from that level upgrades to what we refer to as a threat. And each one of those warrant a different response.
So the actual shooting takes place right about 6:11 p.m. So an hour elapses. How soon after the first identification of the shooter, which is at 5:10 p.m., did you? Well, before we get there, let's lay the foundation. What were you doing that day?
I was in a counter sniper role with one of my teammates in the southwest quadrant of the event center. Distance-wise, approximately 238 yards southwest of the podium, approximately 348 southwest of the shooter's final firing position.
And so he was not ever in your sector of responsibility?
Nor in my visual, nor sector, nor visual. Okay. I never had visual.
How soon after he's identified were you given information that, or did you hear information that there was a suspicious character that you should be alerted to?
I believe those text messages came across, and just to give some background on the text message tactics. So in this type of event, as tactical officers, we try to build redundancy in communications because it's so critical. We start out in a primary role, which would have been radios that day, communicating on a designated channel amongst all the tactical operators. Because we were in support of the host agency, which would have been the Butler, the Emergency Services Unit, we also were running a secondary channel that was our local Washington Regional SWAT Team channel. On top of that, the snipers and counter snipers, or I should just say the counter snipers, there were no snipers involved in our chat, had set up another chat to be able to provide any type of pictures or any type of relevant media or anything like that that we'd be able to crosstalk.
So did you ever see any pictures? Were any pictures ever sent to you?
They were. The pictures came across the chat at approximately 5:38.
So about 30 minutes after the shooter, then at that time, he was a suspicious individual.
That's correct.
And when he gets up on the roof and he's crawling across the roof, is that what threat assessment would normally be made of that guy at that point?
Sure. I think it's important to mention that, from the time the original pictures were taken, the comment of him possibly having a rangefinder or that he was confirmed to have a rangefinder at that point would have automatically escalated him in our protocols from a suspicious person to a person of interest. And that would have warranted some type of either investigatory detention or a stop and question at that point when the rangefinder became a factor.
Ben, Mr. Schaefer, at what point in that hour or before were you notified of the rangefinder, the use of a rangefinder?
Within minutes of the original information being passed. So I would say shortly after 5:38 p.m. or 17:38.
Thank you so much.
My time's expired. You'll bet.
Mr. Biggs, Mr. Schaefer, thank you so much. At this point, we will turn it over for 10 minutes with the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Prince. I know you have a bit of a public profile, but I'm not sure everybody here understands the depth of your experience here. What was the name of the organization that you founded, sir?
Blackwater.
How many employees did you have at Blackwater when you ended up selling the company?
At peak of about 3,500 Americans deployed doing everything from very high-end executive security to aviation and training.
3,500. That's a pretty large company.
Brigade size.
Yeah. With other protective companies that did executive protection around the world, how did you guys rack and stack? Were you one of the largest companies, one of the smaller companies?
I'd say we were the largest doing that. We never really intended to be in the security business. I started after the SEAL teams and built a training facility. SEAL teams have been using private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done one on an industrial scale. And started, and as the demand signal of 2 wars and all the gaps created by trying to take a conventional military into a counterinsurgency created a lot of demand signal, and so we responded by providing a lot of executive security and ended up doing most of the diplomatic security work for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Though there's some similarities between what the Secret Service does and what you had to do overseas, there are definitely some differences.
Sure.
Correct.
In fact, we interacted with the Secret Service whenever the president or some other senior person was coming over. In fact, before we took over security first for Paul Bremer in Iraq, the Secret Service came over to do a study if they wanted to handle it, and they didn't want to touch it at all because they are used to being able to shut down everything and create their own bubble. You can't do that in an active war zone, so that job fell to us, and we grew into that. It was, and that expertise also led us to doing a lot of training for other State Department programs where we'd had at least a dozen countries send their Secret Service equivalents that protected their presidents, and whether that's Lebanon, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of places with active threats and very active, whether it's Sicarios or Hezbollah, we prepped those units to face that kind of threat. And we did it. We did 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured.
I want you to repeat that, sir. Did you guys ever lose a protectee?
No, we did not.
Thank you. You said something interesting on an episode of Sean Ryan that I saw a couple weeks ago. You said, it's in, you know, thank God it was a 20-year-old kid and not a 10-man Hezbollah team. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure, because the fact that a 20-year-old kid could get his drone in the air, could get himself into a firing position only 140 yards away. 140 yards is point-blank range. My then 12-year-old son could have made that shot. Yep. And thank God that 20-year-old aimed at a headshot at President Trump, because if he'd aimed center mass, President Trump would probably be dead, because I don't think he was wearing plates. He wasn't wearing any kind of body armor that would have stopped that rifle round. And a 78-year-old man taking a gunshot wound to the upper chest is not going to go well. A Hezbollah team or ISIS or you name the terrorist organization that actually knows what they're doing would have been successful that day. And the Secret Service was nearly defeated by a 20-year-old, and we all, including Donald Trump, literally dodged a bullet that day.
So I want to double down on that real quick. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, is the Secret Service in its current form and leadership able to stop a threat like that?
President Trump was definitely deprived of resources that day for whatever their political reason. They had 1/3 the amount of agents covering him as were covering Jill Biden in the same region at an indoor event. She had 12 post holders covering her. Again, no statutory or constitutional authority for the First Lady. Donald J. Trump was awarded, had 4 Secret Service agents assigned. And I think even when you look at the debacle of a failure of the advance team to actually secure the perimeter and to deny the obvious sniper hotel locations where a bad guy is going to set up from, to the complete lack of coordination and communication, not communicating with the local law enforcement, not taking the radios of local law, come on, to even when shots were fired, the clumsy, unprofessional way of getting the protectee off the X. There was catastrophic failure across the entire enterprise.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you, at this point, have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There are so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. Anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Erik just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA-level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, you know, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what, I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of a courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio? I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, It was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Erik knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. Last incident in your mind. Seen over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail. Because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this under oath if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
My last question is for Ben Shaffer. In your opinion, Mr. Schaefer, why were counter snipers in AGR that had access to the entire building, from what we've been told, not able to see crooks crawling up the roof when we've seen several videos from the ground level taken by bystanders and individuals not even tasked to be doing security were able to photograph crooks wearing no camouflage, crawling on a white roof? Why were the snipers, the local snipers, not able to see crooks and dispatch of him?
I can only pass this knowledge through secondhand communications. I was not privy to that location or to survey that ahead of time. Although I have spoken to those individuals that were placed in that room that day, based on the depth of the room, their placements, and the limited field of view that those windows provided. They were pretty narrow, as most standard residential windows are held. The angle was too hard for them to see that far to their east, which if they would have been facing south.
Thank you so much. Appreciate my colleague Eli. With that, I'll turn over 10 minutes to the Honorable Mates.
Mr. Prince, you're one of the people I trust most about global affairs. You're constantly assessing the threat environment and intelligence. And I guess my question to you is, because this has been laid bare and these weaknesses have been exposed, are you concerned that we're likely to face not another Crooks, but perhaps a threat like you described, a team from a foreign adversary, a terrorist organization, trying to expose and exploit the weaknesses that now we've seen?
I am very concerned. The inability of the Secret Service or the U.S. government writ large to adjust, to learn a painful lesson from that failure and actually make concrete changes. Because again, the fact that a 20-year-old nearly killed Donald Trump, and the failure to adapt to even yesterday's technology, let alone tomorrow's. And when you see the step change of the ability to deliver precision fires at extended ranges, the lessons being learned on the battlefield of Ukraine, the ability for small units to deliver devastating precision fire onto any target, whether it's the White House, whether it's a motorcade, whether it's a president outside or even inside somewhere, is significant, and I don't think they have any idea what's coming at them.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade that we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process, because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense, how did that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. Here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says 50 to 60 times, hey, again, this widget has a defect, and if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So when the 51st time you tell them the product blows up, the CEO's going to say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel to this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. We're not doing counter-sniper teams. We're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those 3 people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really? What if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're going to rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the guts to take this on. Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter-surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter-sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site? So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do their job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, you know, we might need more, and they were discouraged from even making those requests, so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because, like, you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees, yes, right, of all kind of different profiles and different, I guess, you know, priority, for lack of a better term. And so, like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, you know, beefed up substantially?
I think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise. It just wasn't. I never once, working for President Clinton, Bush, and Obama, had anyone even remotely implicate a political motive for any decision whatsoever. However, from the commentary directed at some of the agents in charge of the Donald Trump deal, which I have heard about, clearly, it appears that for the first time in American history, we have a Secret Service that is making decisions that may not be all political, but may have a political tinge to them. So what you're saying, I would love to say, Congressman, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I tell you with a pure heart, and I'm being absolutely candid, I have no skin in this game. I don't work there anymore. I am not their PR guy. I run my own business. I absolutely believe Donald Trump and an enhanced security posture he should have had would have made him look more presidential, would have facilitated the logistical operation of him traveling. I think they were concerned about optics and making him look like a big shot or whatever, you know, word you want to throw out there. And they were making some of these decisions based purely on grade school level politics.
I don't want to believe that, but I didn't want to believe it with the FBI either. I didn't want to believe it with the NIH either. I mean, a lot of these agencies that have been, I think, subject to political capture, we want to think of them as above that. And we all spend time around Secret Service. We're inspired by their patriotism and the willingness you have to literally take a bullet for someone if necessary. But just like in the military, just like at the FBI, I worry about the political capture happening at headquarters, and then that culture informing decisions in a way that's very damaging to the country. So what Mr. Bongino just said ought to be the most important work of the United States Congress, to figure out if these decisions were run-of-the-mill incompetence that you've got to deal with the better tech and the better processes and the better HR and getting rid of the DEI, but if it's something even darker and more devious than that, that must be rooted out, because what we've seen at these other agencies of government is it does not cure itself. It has to be excised, and that investigation is the most important work we can do. I thank you guys for leading this effort, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. With that, I just want to go first to you, Mr. Prince. You said you roughly have about 3,500 at the peak of Blackwater, correct?
That's right.
Secret Service currently has approximately 7,000, approximately. What was your highest annual revenue, if you don't mind me asking, give or take, for that many operations?
Ooh, for that, the protective mission was about 2,500 to 2,800, and that revenue would have been around $600 million.
So $600 million for that.
And again, that's deploying in a war zone where 41 of our men, my men, were killed in action.
So safe to say, if you had $3.3 billion allocated to you, you could have done some even more miraculous things with resource and assets, correct?
I'll give a simple comparison. Around 2005, George W. Bush wanted to grow the size of the Border Patrol. I remember being called to a congressional hearing then because they compared what it would cost us to train a new CBP agent versus what the federal government was going to take. And our figure came in at 1/3. And their figure was actually higher than sending someone to Harvard for 4 years, and that's to train a guy for 4 months. That's it. So it's the federal government blows money. Like I said in my testimony.
And my point is that the failed metric of government, whereby the more we spend, the better outcome we receive, is a flawed and failed measure, which is why we're at $36 trillion in deficit. And the reason I use that $3 billion, as you know, Mr. Prince, is because that's the actual amount that appropriators have allocated to the Secret Service, which means that, to Dan Bongino's comment, they shouldn't be utilizing past equipment to serve tomorrow. They should have more than enough assets and resources in place with a $3 billion budget. Would you not agree?
Certainly.
And I want to go to you, Mr. Bongino. I want to point out some things because culture failure, as my colleagues pointed out and others, I want to mention a couple of things. August 14, 2024 is reported failure that a Secret Service agent abandoned her post without permission to breastfeed child before Donald Trump was scheduled to arrive in North Carolina. August 12, 2024, it was reported that a Secret Service special agent who was an official site agent for the July 13 Butler PA rally is under investigation for posting videos and photos for protective assignments to social media. July 27, 2024, a Secret Service agent covered the security camera of a local salon in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, before an event featuring Kamala Harris where the salon was closed, but opened it up without approval and utilizing restrooms for an hour and a half while the building's security alarm was going off. July 2nd, 2023, it was reported that a former Secret Service Director Cheadle and senior agency leader sought to destroy the cocaine found in the White House in July of 2024. The evidence was not destroyed due to pushback in individuals in the Secret Service Forensic Service divisions. May 2024, a man enters the U.S. Secret Service Miami field office through a propped open door and was not removed from the building until the following morning. April 24, 2024, a special agent assigned to Harris's detail had a mental breakdown where the agent is reported to have physically attacked the commanding agent in charge at the base after verbal disputes with other agents. Sometimes during 2023 and 2024, at least 2 people breached President Obama's Hawaii residence, though the president wasn't there at the residence. His 2 daughters were on premise at the time. April 2023, a drunken intruder entered the home of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the middle of the night. The man was able to gain access to Sullivan's home despite 24/7 Secret Service protective services in Sullivan due to the sensitive nature of his position. Now, I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Bongino, where you said none of these problems are new. I think just the list of those that I've just mentioned shows that this is not a new problem, but it's existed for quite a while. And with a $3 billion annual budget, I would think that we would start evaluating those mistakes to make those corrective actions. Would you agree with the things that I've listed, with the budget that is allocated, that there should be a much better provision of security for protectees than what you're seeing today?
Oh, there's zero dispute about this. You know, Mr. Prince's company had accountability. People fire him and find a new company if he lost a protectee. You can't fire the Secret Service. 18 U.S.C. 3056, they're obligated to protect him. The Secret Service has a culture problem, Congressman. I was an instructor in our training academy in Beltsville, Maryland for 3 years. I ran operations over there, taught investigations over there, spent a little time in the control tactics unit. I was there for 3 years. Unfortunately, I can't count on one hand. I would need probably 2 and toes as well to count how many agents who could not meet even basic protective functioning skills and criminal investigative skills, but who met other criteria completely irrelevant to job performance, who were pushed through and told with a wink and a nod, this woman or man needs to graduate. Well, why? They're clearly incompetent. Every instructor who's encountered this person has said this person's incompetent to the point where in judgment drills, they're killing the protectee in the judgment drills. That's kind of not what we do. You're not supposed to shoot the protectee yourself in a simunition drill. And you would say things, you would hear things, excuse me, from special agents in charge, and I encourage you all to look into this, how the training center works and how they graduate students, where they would say, well, that person files a lot of complaints, like EEO complaints. Okay, well, are they real? That sounds serious. Sounds like a serious thing to me. I take that stuff seriously. And they would say, well, they file them enough that it's become a nuisance and they're not really legitimate, but because this person files a lot of complaints, we need to graduate them. Some of those people now, matter of fact, not just a few, but many, are out on protective assignments now. And again, this is not...
So what you're saying is that DEI plays a major role, not meritocracy, with regards to the current culture that has been fostered.
No, not a. No, the major role. The Secret Service right now is dominated by DEI. It's not a role. It's the... You ask agents on the president...
And I think that everyone's heard me say before, DEI equals DIE. you know, DEI stands for didn't earn it. And
Well,
we
it
need to
did
be
for
very
Corey
cautious in how
Comparator.
we
So
do this.
ask his family.
Correct. I just want to move on briefly with the time. Mr. Schaefer, I just need you to kind of confirm the no's. And when I say confirm the no's, you'll understand. Didn't take the communication platform that was given by local forces, correct?
That's correct.
Didn't take the surveillance drone offered by local forces, is that correct?
That is correct.
Didn't show up for the briefing to ensure that last-minute planning could be accounted for.
That is correct.
Didn't take any necessary measures to talk to the Kubota dealer, who was 400 yards away to the 12 o'clock direct line of sight, to even see whether or not they could gain access to that rooftop or talk to the owner.
That is correct.
Did not access the water tower, which has the highest vantage point, and provide oversight that would have also looked at the AGR building.
That is correct.
You know, I'm looking at all this and I'm noting a lot of no's of things that didn't happen. And unfortunately, because we've allowed this to go on for weeks and weeks, we're now going to be faced with the fact that they're going to be memorializing all these documents to reflect July 9, July 10, July 11, dotting I's, crossing T's that wasn't actually going forward. Now, I want to ask you something, Mr. Prince, because you know this all too well about counterterrorism operations. We know for a fact that we have an open border with roughly 10 million people that come across. We know that cartels are cheering on President Joe Biden as the employee of the month every single month. When you think about 2018, where you had $500 million in revenue from cartel to now $13+ billion in revenue. If you knew a president was coming in that would put things like remain in Mexico back in place, secure our borders, and cut your revenue, you have the training, you have the assets, you have the revenue, would you deem that person as a threat and want to take that individual out?
It's a very simple answer, because you can see what they did in the last Mexican election that just happened a few months ago. They killed 27 conservative candidates, assassinated while campaigning.
And noting that you had the successful counterterrorism operation that eliminated the shadow master, Qasem Soleimani of Quds Force, as well as for Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, who led the Iranian proxy militias of Iraq, would you deem that as them declaring a fatwa to increase your threat profile as an individual protectee?
Certainly the Iranians would see it as a risk worth taking.
And you also note that a question that needs to be asked of the FBI is that on July 12th, a 46-year-old Pakistani male named Burchan was actually captured, who had also plotted assassination against President Donald J. Trump and 35 elected officials. The question is how did you think an individual who's on a terrorist watch list, landed in Houston, Texas, was questioned by the FBI, and I would love to hear his answers because they must have been spectacular, and then released, noting that this individual flew from Pakistan to Iran for 4 days prior to this. Would you note that as very questionable?
Again, you can put him in the long list of other people that don't belong here, that our federal government is failing to do their job.
Thank you. With that, I have run out of my time. I will now hand it over to the Honorable Chip Roy for 10 minutes.
I thank my friend from Florida, Mr. Mills. Thank my colleagues here. I thank you, gentlemen, for testifying here today. And I'd ask my staff they'd put the map up here on the board. And if you would please, the technology folks, would you please play the shooter on roof behind President Trump angle video? And as we get this queued up and we start to play it, I'm gonna ask you some questions. I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Bongino. Trying to through the question that I'm wrestling with, a lot of Americans are wrestling with, which is whether or not the failures here that we're all observing. Everybody agrees there was failure, almost catastrophic failure, and certainly catastrophic for Mr. Comparator and his family. But was there more? Was there willful blindness here? So if you could cue up the video, that'd be great. They've got that queued up. If they don't, then I'm just going to go ahead and proceed.
Great gentlemen. So we're going to bring him up for Can we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. I'll get you up here. The world will see a vibrant Republican.
See beyond the president, you can see the shooter moving across the roof. Now, I look at this as someone who is a prosecutor, who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, who worked in the Attorney General's office, not as someone who was a sniper like Mr. Mills or Mr. Crane, working in the Secret Service. But to be very clear, the perimeter, the building he shot from is outside of the perimeter. And the video we see, we can see him clearly just a mere 130 yards away. So here's the setup that I want to ask. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bongino. Do you believe that you can just chalk up to mere incompetence that the Secret Service did not attend the 9 o'clock meeting for scheduling purposes? They literally just didn't attend. Can you chalk up, and just, I'm going to go down the list and just jump in. Can you chalk up to mere incompetence the conversations and communications that we talked about before, where you didn't have a body present and they were using the cell phones, and they did not retrieve the radios, as Mr. Higgins has reported? Can you chalk it up to mere incompetence that they identified crooks about an hour time, and then President Trump was never removed from the stage? They didn't delay, they didn't hold him back, they didn't remove him from the potential danger. That the perimeter did not include the buildings around over here, and to the extent, should there have been a perimeter that was farther out, and to the extent that the perimeter wasn't farther out, that they at least make sure the building wasn't covered. Is that just incompetence? Is it just incompetence that there was no drone being flown and the drone was turned down by the Secret Service? Was it just incompetence that the shooter had a drone, as the FBI director testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee, that he literally had flying within a couple hundred feet of the stage the same day, mere hours before the shooting? Is it just incompetence, what we're hearing now about the whistleblower saying that there were no canines? Was it just incompetence that there wasn't sufficient policing along the security border? Was it just incompetence that there was allegedly an abandoning of the post due to heat? That there was supposed to be someone on top of the roof and that they didn't get on the roof because it was too hot? Is it just incompetence that there was additional security requests turned down, according to the memos that we saw out of Senator Josh Hawley, and encouraging agents not to request to additional security requests? And was it just incompetence what we saw with respect to the police body footage, which I'll play here in just a second, if we could cue up the police body footage video, where you've got the local police talking about what they said to the Secret Service. If y'all could play that video real quick, and then I want you to respond.
Well, body's a good, that's a good word. I told them they need to post the guy over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that Tuesday. I told them to post guys over here. I have no contact with the inside. What? I thought you guys were. No, we're inside. Alpha 1, Bravo 1. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you all. Mr. Bongino.
I told them to post.
Can you respond to that?
I wasn't even concerned about it because I thought that's how we lose the guy walking back.
Can you respond to that?
Sure.
Can you respond to that question? Because that's what the American people want to know.
You know, Congressman, if you had just ended with your first statement and said, well, we may have screwed up the perimeter, you could maybe attribute it to ignorance. Layered incompetence always means intent, correct? So I'll give you an example. In a mall parking lot, it's 97 degrees, and you leave a kid in there, and you close the door. Did they intend to kill the kid? Probably not. But how stupid do you have to be to do that? So in Secret Service training, you're basically taught a ring-based system, but don't think of it as rings. Think of it as a three-dimensional ring, like a bubble with rings. So you got this circle, but it's three-dimensional above and below. In that outer ring, again, this is Secret Service 101, Charlie Brown encyclopedia stuff. This isn't like advanced level PDT, protective detail training. In that outer ring, you have police officers. That outer ring is out to about 1,000 yards, which is about what a really technically proficient sniper can hit. Why was the perimeter set? Again, absolute total incompetence. But then factor in the other things, and I just want to add a few more. How is it that a counter surveillance unit whose actual job is to detect, to counter surveillance, that's what they do. They're the best at what they do. We asked the question during the conversation we had earlier. How is it that they missed this guy roaming around when the police officers, clearly using their good law enforcement instincts, said we've got a problem? The answer is because they weren't there. Is that incompetence, or is that shutting the door in 97 degrees with your kid there going, didn't know? How did you not have a roof line 130 yards away secured when you're taught day one in Secret Service training that the effective range of a really quality sniper is out to 1,000 yards? How did you not have a drone? That not only did you not have a drone, again, this is where we get to the shutting the door in 97 degrees and pretending you didn't know. It was offered. They offered you a drone. It's unforgivable. And just think of the rings quickly, and I'll wrap this up. So in the outer ring, you have police officers, you have counter surveillance, and you have a protective intelligence team. Protective intelligence team is trained to go and find threats. They miss them. There's no counter surveillance team. The cops catch it, but because the comms break down, they miss it. In that middle perimeter, you have what they call post standers. Post standers they're not DTD agents. They're field office agents. They're not Donald Trump detail agents. Those guys were not even Secret Service. They were HSI, most of them, who are great guys and were fantastic. But that's not what they do. If you grab me as a former Secret Service guy and said, hey, Dan, can you go do a Homeland Security investigation? No, that's not what I learned. We are training Secret Service agents to do protection so we don't have to use other entities that don't do protection. So that's the middle perimeter. So that breaks down. The inner perimeter, as you just saw, I'm glad you played that video. Envision that as what we would call the shift, the body guys, right? He's got a shift around them and supervisors. Everyone missed that guy crawling across the roof when he defeated the external, the middle, and the internal perimeter. You shut the door at 97 degrees. I'm sorry. Layered intent, layered incompetence like that is absolutely intent.
I've got another question on that, but I just want to ask you, Mr. Prince, real quick. Do you have a relatively short comment on that? Can you dismiss all of this as sheer incompetence?
The question I want to have answered is if other counter sniper agents, officers, saw any person laying in a prone position with a rifle pointed at the President of the United States, do they have authorization to take a shot immediately, or do they have to get permission? Because if the Secret Service wasn't there and they were laying at a stakeout for a bank robbery, would they have to get permission if they saw means and intent to murder someone? I don't understand why any of the other officers didn't engage sooner.
Mr. Schaefer, do you have any comment on that in terms of the engagement and the rules of engagement that were in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I can clarify that a little bit. So as a law enforcement sniper, we have a lot of responsibilities and inherited flexibility. One of those flexible procedures or statuses that we incur is known as compromised authority. Compromised authority in the law enforcement sense basically lays out the requirements for a deadly force response. And in that point in time, based on all the prerequisites that were identified and all the checks in the boxes that were made, Mr. Crooks would have met that level or that threshold.
I'll let some of the experts on that subject follow up on that. I think there's probably some more follow up there. I just want to ask one last question, my last minute time, Mr. Bongino. We talked about this before. I have seen credible information, the extent to which the shooter had significant explosives that were sophisticated beyond that you would expect some 20-year-old just to put together, and that he had sophisticated detonation devices on his person, or a sophisticated detonation device, and importantly, that his digital footprint is completely MIA, that his digital footprint is missing, and that how can a 20-year-old in today's time have no digital footprint? So do you have any thoughts on that, any comments on that? And that'll be my last question.
Well, 4 years of doing protective intelligence investigations with the Secret Service, interviewed probably hundreds of people who have credibly threatened our protectees. I've never seen anything like it. If you would have told me it was a 60-year-old guy who had lived most of his life without a computer and for the last 10 years have been planning this, hard to believe but digestible. You're telling me a 20-year-old kid who's grown up in the digital era figured this out when he was, what, 13, to never get an online presence? We've seen nothing. Nothing. We're now 6 weeks in. There's not a Facebook photo. You know, it's incredible. We know every single thing about these shooting incidents when there's a political narrative to be had by the media and the other side. We do. You know who their high school girlfriend was. Sadly, you know everything about these people. We know nothing about this guy. And sophisticated explosives, we have this massive law enforcement bureaucracy. No one's got him with an online search history at a library saying, how do I build this? He's 20 years old. It just defies logic. I can tell you, again, 4 years doing these exact investigations, never, ever seen or heard anything like this in my life.
Thank you so much. We're now going to go into our second round of questioning. And again, I appreciate the panel and all that you guys have been providing in regards to expertise on ground truth realities. We're going to continue to move on, going back to the Honorable Andy Biggs. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just try to hit some quick questions. When Mr. Schaefer, you were talking to us earlier about moving to texting. The counter snipers were texting. What does that do with your ability to stay on glass?
was a secondary or possibly even a third method of communication as it was utilized that day. The sniper teams in the law enforcement concept sometimes are not a team. Sometimes we're deployed into situations where we're a single operator. So we're not only responsible for the surveillance aspect of the service we provide, but also having that deadly threat ability on board. So that can be very distracting in that point in that day. That third level of communication would have pulled us away from our primary responsibilities to provide that deadly cover if needed.
Thank you. And Mr. Prince, you mentioned security bubbles, and I want you to elaborate on that because we've talked a little bit about the perimeter. And the perimeter seems oddly narrow in this particular instance. Can you talk about security bubbles and the perimeters here?
As Dan was talking, right, the normal of that bubble is out to 1,000 yards based on how far a capable sniper can take a shot. The fact is, clearly this bubble was less than 100 yards because they disregarded the industrial facility, the water tower, et cetera, and it speaks to the lack of seriousness of Secret Service leadership in how they were conducting these missions. I don't think they regarded Trump as a worthy protectee. They were doing the absolute minimum. And I say my greater concern is as you look at all the litany of failure is long and deep. And if it tips towards malice, that opens up an entirely different can of worms.
Right.
Because it's hard to be part of a republic with people that actually want to kill you.
Right.
Political disagreement, fine. Settle at the ballot box. But if people don't want to settle it at the ballot box, then it gets solved by a cartridge box. And that's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Right. And well, we could go on that. I know some of my colleagues might want to do that as well. But I want to get to one last point, and that before I run out of time, and that is another failure. I think everybody here is probably, everybody up on this group anyway, has been with a president or a protectee, and there's been some kind of security hold. I mean, we've just stopped, and you say you're going to hold. Why was there no security hold put on Trump at any time if you had some kind of individual? I mean, that Mr. Schaefer has described actually did arise to a threat level. Why was there no security hold put on President Trump? Why was he allowed to go on the stage? Why wasn't he taken down? Why didn't we see a pause?
For me?
Yeah, Dan.
What makes your question even more impactful is every Secret Service site for a high threat level protectee has what they call a holding room, which you would guess is for holding the protectee. I see Congressman Gacy because it's actually called the holding room. Yeah. The holding room is for things just like this. The holding room is let's say a congressman shows up and is a little late. There's an accident. They'll hold them in the holding room so they can join. You all have been in it. None of this is new. You've been in the holding room. There's a Secret Service agent at the door. You guys have congressional hardpins. A staffer escorts you in. Every one of you has seen this or will in the Trump administration. This is not a mystery to anyone. Why was he put on what Erik had called, accurately so, the X? We use the exact same terminology as the military. The X is where that protectee or that limo with the protectee in it is. Why was he put on the X? You have an open threat. Ben has described, and your timeline lays out, was there for an hour. I'm not going to play any word games. Were they a threat or suspicious? Well, if you're a threat, it's because you're doing something suspicious. And if you're suspicious, it's because you could be a threat. These are silly, stupid word games. You know when it's not a threat? When your CSU or BI team goes and grabs the guy and determines he's not a threat. Until then, your question's accurate. You put him in the holding room, which is the point of the holding room.
Can I ask one more question? So I just want to follow that up. And you made the point earlier about counter surveillance. There were no counter surveillance teams there. But there's a public domain videos of him, Mr. Crooks, wandering around. Was there anything in his behavior wandering around that if he would have had a counter surveillance team there, it would have triggered an interaction with this guy earlier
I'm going to answer yes, but respectfully, and I know you understand, the CSU and PI teams are trained in very specific behavioral indicators that would give off, and speaking about them openly would probably give operational knowledge to bad guys. I know you understand that, but the short answer is not only one, but many behavioral indicators he was giving off that if we could talk in a secure setting, you'd be like, how did they miss this? The CSU team would not have missed it if they were there, which they weren't.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biggs. We will now go to the Honorable Eli Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, do you have any confidence that Secret Service has learned their lesson?
No, because I've been involved in a number of, we have 10 years in the Secret Service. I was in the training center when the Georgia grenade nearly exploded. And, you know, the only reason it didn't kill President Bush is because the guy wrapped it in a towel. That's it. It's the only reason he survived, because we got lucky. And the changes made from that lasted about a month. They added more magnetometers. And then basically the same problems resurface again. So no.
I want to read a text to you and see what your thoughts are on this. Do you know who Joe Kent is? Mr. Bongino? Joe Kent, he's running for Congress right now, Special Forces guy.
Oh, yes.
Up in Washington.
Yeah.
This is a text he sent me on, I believe, Monday, August 19th. He said, "Hey, brother, I know you are doing an independent J13 investigation. I want to share this anecdote with you from my experience with Speaker Mike Johnson's U.S. Secret Service detail this weekend. Bottom line up front, Speaker's detail was incredibly lax, failed to seal off all entrances to a very small venue. Johnson wasn't secured and very easy to access. Long version. We had a local steakhouse host my fundraiser with the Speaker. Location was only available after people RSVP'd. But the entrances to the steakhouse had Kent for Congress signs on the two entrances. One entrance was inside the hotel, one out on the street in a busy pedestrian area. I arrived about 45 minutes early to check out the venue and to make sure my team had stuff ready. I also wanted to see if the U.S. Secret Service had a checkpoint set up. I carry everywhere. I planned on leaving my pistol in a hotel room my team had there. I entered the hotel, followed the Kent signs into the steakhouse, and immediately walked up to the unsecured holding room the Speaker was in. He was on a call, so he did not notice me. Neither did any of his detail. His detail was inside the restaurant just BSing. No control over the two entrances at all. Once the event started, they put on a good show and looked the part. I can't interpret their intent, but they failed a basic, simple task: secure the two entry points, a shocking level of incompetence. The event was in Vancouver, in the shadow of Portland, Oregon. Mr. Bongino, is Speaker Johnson, what's his job?
Well, that would be Capitol Hill Police, but it speaks to a larger issue with these security failures. What was mentioned about 3/4 of the way through that text, where everything becomes about optics. I'll give you just a quick example. You know, think about this. Why are Secret Service agents out there wearing suits? You don't see that with a lot of Israeli Shin Bet and others, because the threat over there is existential every day. I mean, these are little things. You're worried about optics and what people look like, you know, red ties on agents and guys who've got their shoes shined, when you're not worried about door kickers who are going to keep you alive. The good show part is a problem, and it's ubiquitous, whether it's DSS, whether it's Capitol, whether it's Secret Service. We have to start focusing on job tasks and not, you know, operational optics or who's got the freshly pressed suit on. These guys have to be out there ready to go into action and defeat that 15, 20-man Hezbollah team or group of Sicarios Erik's talking about before. This was a 20-year-old kid who broke them down. Can you imagine if they had detonated, taken out that fence line, and rushed a 10, 15-man team in there with rifles and heavy weapons? You know, there would have been a mass murder scene. That motorcade would have never gotten out of there.
Yeah. Thank you. You were talking about slings earlier and how long it took the Secret Service to adopt slings on their primary weapon system. Why is it important to have a sling on primary weapon system? And what is this? Why did it take so long for the Secret Service to get on board with having their agents carry slings?
You know, I candidly wish I was joking with you guys, but I'm not. The Secret Service's operating kind of de facto motto when I was there about technology, we're laughingly calling it sling technology. I mean, really, it's like technology like the wheels technology, right? Is because we've always done it that way. I'm not kidding. You get a bunch of Secret Service agents up here and you get them on the record, and they will tell you exactly that. You know, I remember when GPS technology first started, and President Bush was riding his bike, and we brought a guy into headquarters, and we said, hey, we're losing President Bush a lot on the bike. I mean, he was a good biker. He'd go in the woods. And, I mean, the guys were with him, but the motorcade was having a hard time finding him. Well, maybe we should look at this thing called GPS. We've never done it that way before. Why would you need a sling? For 1,000 different reasons. You may need to go hands-on. You may need to grab a ladder. You may have a weapons malfunction. What are you going to do, hand the weapon to someone else in the crowd while I get my pistol? This is technology the military's been using, as you know, for since World War I. Who knows? It's just, it's a mentality where no one wants to take a chance. And if nothing's happened because they got lucky in the past, then there's no reason to change anything.
Mr. Prince, I heard you had an interesting take on a public episode that I heard you doing an interview on. A lot of Americans believe that this was possibly an inside job, just based on everything that they've seen leading up to the assassination attempt. They saw efforts to impeach Donald Trump. They saw efforts to, put him into bankruptcy. They saw the DOJ weaponized against him, and they saw, folks try and put him in jail for 750 years, and then this happens. I know you have an interesting take on that where you really don't believe that. Can you go ahead and share that with this panel today?
You're right. There is a long list of ways that the one political party has weaponized all aspects of government in our society against their political opponent. And that is exceedingly dangerous for the survival of the republic, because that can go both ways. I don't think this was a grand conspiracy, another shooter, et cetera. Because if there was a second shooter, when the 20-year-old was shot and the Secret Service detail did an awful job of getting Trump off the X and let him stand up again, great instincts of the president to come back defiant, having just been shot in the head, to come back and say, fight, fight, fight. Great instincts on him. He never should have had the opportunity to do that, because his detail should have put him horizontal and moved him off there immediately. If there was a second shooter, it was a prime time for them to be shooting. So I don't believe there is a second shooter. I think this is a litany of incompetence. And it speaks to, as we also remember the anniversary of the debacle of Afghanistan, our problem is we have a federal government that doesn't have any accountability in any way, shape, or form. And I push back on you in Congress to affect the bureaucracy the one way that they care: cut their damn budget. Starve them out. Nothing else will get their attention other than their starvation.
Well, I can definitely agree with that. I think all of us on here have been willing to shut the government if we're not willing to shut the border, and we've made that clear at times. With that, I'll hand it over for the Honorable Matt Gaetz for 5 minutes.
I've learned a lot in this session, and here's what I think I've picked up. One thing did not go wrong that resulted in President Trump being shot. Mr. Bongino explained the 3 different layers and the lack of air controls. Mr. Schaefer explained the comms breakdowns. You got the paperwork back and forth with the field office and headquarters. So all these things are going wrong. So then the obvious question is, why did that systemic cascading failure occur? And I think you've given us really good testimony as to why. First, it's Bongino saying, well, this was bound to happen, based on these structural failures, with technology failures, with this embrace of DEI and a quota system. You had a very low floor to start with. And then I don't want to bury the lead here. You heard Mr. Prince's testimony that he believes that a motivation here might be they just didn't deem Trump a sufficiently worthy protectee, and that could inform on it. And then I think the most damaging, and I never really contemplated until you gave the testimony, Mr. Bongino, that giving the Trump detail the assets they requested, air, additional manpower presence, more folks, so that not everything is pushed out to locals, but indeed is the folks that have gone through the type of training that you provided in Maryland. Well, that was because that kind of a force posture could make Trump appear more presidential, more ascendant, more in charge. And I do think that in addition to what Mr. Prince has said about budget, there are things Congress can do to direct specific demands for documents around those three vectors and work on all of them. To the structural issues, Mr. Prince, is it something leadership can fix? Because one thing we found is that you try to put downward pressure on any budget around here for anything, and it's like you're committing a war crime. And in some cases, we've seen some agencies improve when you get the right leadership in and can administer an effective agency. What's your perspective on that?
I remember in the late 80s, during the Iran-Contra crisis, controversy, and the CIA was not being forthcoming with some documents that Congress had requested. And of course, the Democrats were in charge of Congress then. Tip O'Neill was the speaker. He made it very clear that he was specifically withholding all the pay for all the SIS, the Special Intelligence Service, senior intelligence service officers at CIA headquarters until those documents were delivered. Shocker, the documents were delivered by Friday to the Congress. Bureaucrats will respond to very specific pain points. I think it even speaks wider than this debacle in Butler, Pennsylvania, but the fact that and it speaks to under-resourcing Trump, they no-resourced Bobby Kennedy, RFK, when his uncle assassinated while president, his father assassinated while attorney general for the act of politics in America, and they denied him. So it is not too much to surmise that a politicized Secret Service succumbing to the whims of Jill Biden, sending 4 post holders to cover Trump, 12 to cover Jill Biden. At that point, no coverage of Bobby Kennedy. Again, this can only be solved. Congress has the power of purse. Use it as a large bludgeon.
Yeah, Mr. Schaefer, is there any dynamic you think I've missed in sort of summarizing this as, low agency performance generally layered with the other dynamics that the other witnesses have shared?
I don't believe so, Congressman. I think you've covered most of the relevant points in describing how that posture all relates and how this, began as maybe a single failure and multiplied into a much greater failure, just based on different levels. I'll say that, the local law enforcement agencies that were involved that day, both tactical and non-tactical, were improvising, adapting, and overcoming to a lack of intelligence that was provided to them that day. In my historical background, in the Marine Corps, these types of events require planning, require reconnaissance, require intelligence in multiple stages. It requires rehearsals, things that were not seen in this event for this day. My knowledge is when I came onto the scene that morning, that I was fed multiple briefs and multiple maps of the area. I gathered information as much as I could the night before, which is about the same time as my commander had received the briefings for that day. So we really felt like we were on the back foot and just tried to overcome that throughout the day and gather what we could.
Great, thank you. My time's expired, but I think you've all provided us excellent areas for further inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. I want to go over some forensic questions because I think that as we continue to peel the layers back, what we don't find is enough answers, but more questions that need to be asked. Just in a quick yes or no, do you find it odd that literally only days after the attempted assassination on President Donald J. Trump, while the roof was too sloped to place individuals for counter-sniper operations, that it wasn't too sloped to a roof for the FBI to go ahead and tamper, in my opinion, with evidence by washing the roof off that may have had significant evidence on it? Do you find that odd?
Yes, I do, Congress.
Mr. Prince?
Yeah, I certainly don't realize, I don't understand what the rush was to wash a roof.
Mr. Bongino?
No doubt.
Do we also find it odd that, as of recent, one of our colleagues, Representative Higgins, had uncovered the fact that the body of Matthew Crooks had not only been released and cremated, but that the coroner who's responsible for releasing the body had no knowledge of it? Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Prince?
Sounds like destruction of evidence.
Mr. Bongino?
Given the gravity of what happened, absolutely.
Do you also find it odd that no ballistics, no toxicology report, no confidence in the actual, I guess, proof of who it was who took the shot has been provided to date? And also, just to follow on to that, how quickly the crime scene at the home was actually released before any evidence had been obtained and released? Mr. Schaefer.
In total analysis of your question, I think it warrants maybe a little more than a yes or no. I absolutely find that to be troubling. I also find that there were multiple friendlies that engaged the shooter that day, and no report has been given back to that local agency that was involved in that information. I feel that's critical.
Mr. Prince.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things that just smell around the entire thing, and like I said in my opening statement, only the disinfectants of transparency will clean this up. And so covering it up and hiding only compounds an already a really bad look on the federal government.
Mr. Bongino.
Yeah, I'll say again, given the gravity of the situation, extremely odd.
Do we find it odd that in addition to a 20-year-old not having a social media presence and being scrubbed, that in addition to having the knowledge on how to create sophisticated explosive devices with a multi-channel transmitter, that there was also leaked evidence or leaked information on regards to 3 encrypted accounts? Do you find it odd that these encrypted accounts, which are overseas, has not been discussed and or talked about at any point? Mr. Schaefer.
Absolutely, Congressman.
Mr. Prince.
In the same way that Congress passed a law in 1992 that within 25 years, all things related to the Kennedy assassination were supposed to be declassified and released, why cover this up? Why, again, what is being covered and what is being covered up and why? And it makes a bad situation even worse.
Mr. Bongino.
Odd, to say the least, yes.
I want to go back to something earlier as well. Mr. Bongino, Secret Service, NYPD, worked in the actual training of it. Do you believe that a protective detail should be appointed based upon the title you carry or the threat level based upon the office in which you are to obtain?
It should exclusively be based on a threat assessment. It should have nothing to do with the title.
And do you agree that if you were the Secret Service director, that when the request came in based on President Trump's profile, based on the existing threats that would need to be mitigated, based on the request by his own officers, that would be something that you would approve or disapprove?
There isn't a scenario where a sane, rational, well-trained Secret Service agent would deny CSU or counter-sniper assets to a threat, to a protectee with a threat footprint like Donald Trump. Not a chance.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I know that you're enjoying the private sector, but I can tell you we'd have been far better off by having the director of the Secret Service be Dan Bongino than it be Ronald Rowe or Director Cheadle. I'm going to go ahead with this and turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Honorable Chip Roy, for 5 minutes.
Thank my friend from Florida. I know some of you are on a clock. Got to get out of here at 2 o'clock. I think we're going to come right up on that number. I'll just have a few questions really quickly. First of all, because we had some conversations earlier about the building from which Mr. Crooks was able to position himself. One of the things that's been talked about is the slope of the roof and all this nonsense. People, we've seen members, Clay Higgins, some of these guys been able to walk on that roof. But one of the things that I was questioning about, nothing was deployed, given the extent that it was allowed to have the perimeter inside of that, and then allowed that guy to be able to get access to it, and all the stuff you're talking about with the rings, and they didn't even deploy anything like putting barbed wire up or anti-climb spikes or anything else, right? There was literally nothing put up to deter someone from being able to get access to those buildings. Is that correct, Mr. Schaefer? You were on site?
Yes, Congressman, that is correct.
And I mean, would that have been, again, given that it wasn't within the perimeter, would that have been another thing they could have done? Was done something to at least limit the ability to have access to the building? Put some sort of anti-climb spikes, barbed wire, anything up around it?
Yes, there were multiple possibilities on how to defeat that or possibly take that out of play as a threat area.
A question I'd ask Mr. Prince, you raised the defunding question. I don't think anybody questions where I personally come from on desire to defund a large chunk of government to the extent that I possibly can. But that being said, I think it was Mr. Gates who laid out the extent to which you're viewed as basically a war criminal if you dare, raise those issues. But the real issue is, right, it's always the threat of shutdown, right? It's like, oh, things will shut down. And so this is my actual specific question. The psychology is always reversed. It says if you take the money away from the Secret Service in this case, or let's say we're talking about Border Patrol, dealing with the border. We had Mark Morgan here earlier. Anything we do to say, hold on, no, we're not going to give you this funding unless we get X. And then the other side says, well, you're taking away the funding from the thing you say you want. And i.e., we want a competent Secret Service. What is your response to that as someone who has been an effective and efficient manager of a large-scale organization dealing with security, to push back on that argument, which I think is a flawed argument? I have my own views on it, but I want to hear your thoughts.
What made America great, what made our society effective in the first place was competition, was innovation and efficiency from the private sector. Government did not make America great. And so that is a fundamental difference in paradigm that needs to be settled at the ballot box. And even Republicans have to return to being they have to return to be the party of fiscal sanity, because even Republicans have been runaway spenders, prolific, and it is going downhill on one ski instead of on two skis. We've been going downhill.
Mr. Schaefer, and this is a question that I don't know exactly what you're going to say to it, but as someone who's on the ground and familiar with it, was there anything, we have that video, which I'm not going to pull up for sake of time, where you've got the sniper sitting up on the roof behind the president, right, and seemed to be looking across the direction where Mr. Crooks was located. Was there at any point any rules of engagement or any orders coming down from on high that prohibited those individuals from reacting, to the best of your knowledge? Because I'm trying to figure out what was in their line of sight. And again, that's speculative from my standpoint because I'm not there.
Sure. So I can speak on both locations. So the north team, we'll call them, in the northern side of the buildings there, had a few obstructions visually to be able to engage them, to engage the shooter at that point in time. The southern team had a much better vantage point, and that speaks directly just to the location and proximity to where the shooter was located. However, going back to our earlier discussion about compromised authority, and Mr. Bongino can add to this as well, in that capacity, we don't need authorization. We don't need any other things other than the prerequisites for a threat to meet a deadly force response.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Bongino, I'll let you comment on that, and I'll ask you one more question in closing, because I know you need to go. We had some reporting from Ms. Crabtree, who was here with the panel earlier and is here with us now, earlier about the potential engagement or interference, I should say, by Iranian authorities in terms of our ability to protect our president, Secret Service, and so forth. Do you have any perspectives on that and why that's particularly problematic, or anything to add about that, and how our foreign adversaries are viewing what we're seeing unfold in front of us?
Well, I want you to keep in mind that we've known about the Iranian threat after the death of Soleimani to John Bolton, Donald Trump, former President Trump, and others for well over 3 years now. So there's no, keep in mind, this is a regime that has a history of documented terror attacks who sloganeers death to America. So they're not actually, their motives are, you don't have to investigate their motives, they tell you. They've known about it. If they have, and Susan's an excellent reporter, if you're not following her, you're making a big mistake on this. I have no reason to not believe her reporting or its accuracy. She's been that good.
3 sources, if I remember correctly.
If these 3 sources are accurate, that we have been compromised and security allocation decisions are being made by people under the influence of the Iranian terror regime, then it's going to be a whole different panel if we do this again. By the way, I have to run. I'm sorry. I got to excuse myself. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm done. Yield back.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, but we're going to do a quick close, myself and Congressman Crane. But before I close, I just have one more question for you, Mr. Schaefer, which is, can you tell me exactly how many rounds and how many shots were fired?
Yes. So the total round count that was released after the investigations were done were 10 rounds, 8 by the shooter himself, the threat, and 2 friendly rounds after that.
The 2 rounds both making impact, or can you confirm on this?
That has not been made possible, or we have not had the opportunity to confirm that based on the withheld information of the autopsy report.
And given your involvement in this, what also have you heard on the explosives and the sophistication of the devices?
So the explosive devices that were used, the primary charge was a homemade variant known as ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, or AMFO, supposedly manufactured possibly in the residence of the home. Obviously, for those that don't know, in the construction of these types of materials, there's a process. There are things that need to be procured, and most likely those things would have been located through online means, which again leads to more questions, in this matter. And then the programming of those devices were done with a remote detonating device that was specifically designed for that purpose, most commonly used in the commercial fireworks market.
So needless to say that these types of devices being bought would have brought someone up on an FBI watch list potentially, very much so like the Pakistani individual who was arrested on July 12th who had traveled to Iran prior to coming into Houston would have been on that FBI watch list. I want to just thank everyone who's here today. I want to thank everyone who is watching and participating in this. Needless to say, this is the beginning of more of these forums. This is not going to be the only one. We need to get further transparency and accountability for the American people. What we know is that not only was it a catastrophic failure, but all of our subject matter experts and our on ground has confirmed the suspicions that we all know to be true, which is how much of this is criminal gross negligence, how much of this was potentially compromised and purposeful intent, and how much more information is the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Secret Service, and Congress going to be willing to obtain in an effort to try and go ahead and provide this to you, we the people. I think that it's key that we not hide behind the lowest levels of classifications behind closed doors in any of our committees, understanding that Congress and our salaries are paid for by the American taxpayers, our House is paid for by the American taxpayers, and therefore the information too should be available to the American taxpayers. I think that we look at what was the coordination efforts between ESU, HSI, and Secret Service. I think we get to the bottom of who refused, not when, not what, but who refused the surveillance drone, who refused to utilize the communications that were provided, who refused to provide the site security plan that would have shown all the available buildings. Was each individual building numbered, and was those indicated during the time of the actual security planning? Where is Thomas Crooks as far as the toxicology and all the other reports? Where was the white van, and what is the follow-up? Why was the FBI so early to release? And even Attorney General Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, said she had never seen in her time as the Attorney General a crime scene released at such a rapid pace. What was the coroner's understanding of when the body was released, why and how? Why is it that they did not show up to the morning briefing? Why was a Kubota dealership only 400 yards away not being looked at? Where are the encrypted accounts, and why are we not getting further information? Again, I think that we're understanding that we've investigated the culture of the Secret Service and what needs to change and why DEI is not healthy for our military, for our security services, or otherwise. But I think that we need to further investigate the questions of why did this take place, how did this take place, and what do we do to prevent it in the future and moving forward? I thank everybody, and I'll turn it over for the final and closing remarks by my colleague, Congressman Eli Crane.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you to the witnesses for coming today. I want to especially thank Ben Shaffer for coming out today. Anytime you're in law enforcement and you take the risk to come and testify before Congress like this, it takes a lot of courage. So Ben, thank you. I know a lot of other individuals would not be willing to come testify. I also want to thank Mr. Prince for providing your expertise. This is for any whistleblowers out there that want to work with this committee as we move forward, or this panel, whatever we're calling it. The email is now live if you want to reach out. It's j13tipline@mail.house.gov. That is j13tipline@mail.house.gov. Obviously, a big part of this panel and, how much success we have or don't have is going to, rely on whether or not we have people who are willing to whistleblow and come talk to us. And one of the reasons we're doing this, obviously, is because we don't want this to be memory hold. And that's what we see going on right now. It seems like the news cycle moves so fast that, this feels like it was 10 years ago already. And unfortunately, if we're going to make sure this never happens again, we need to stay on top of this. We need to keep it front and center, and we need to keep asking questions. And so that's why we're doing this. We'll continue to do it, but because we don't have subpoena authority and power here, we're going to need to rely on whistleblowers. So if you guys want to come talk to us, we'd love to talk to you. That's the place you can do it. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to close with one last thing, which is just, we talk about this, we talk about the president. We've certainly, go ahead and put him up there. We just want to make sure we honor and respect the passing of Mr. Comparator. And we're going to keep seeking the truth, but someone died that day, and that's why this matters. It goes beyond just the assault on the president, but a man lost his life. Yield back.
Well done. And with that, we'll go ahead and once again thank everybody for what you've done. Thank you, Mr. Prince. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Bongino, who've done an amazing job, and to all my colleagues who are willing to come forward and not be silenced. That's why this website's so important. We look forward to holding a follow-up forum with new information, as well as if we have other witnesses who are willing to come from earlier that's going to come before our forum, so we will be doing this again. And again, let's do this to honor Corey Comparator, who has fallen. Let us not forget the significance of August 26, 2021, and our fallen 13, and let's continue to seek and find out the truth. Thank you so much for your time. So we're going to start off this forum and hearing. I want to thank our guests for being here today and our subject matter experts. I also want to thank Representative Bob Good for being in attendance. The purpose of this hearing is to ensure that we have the ability to ask the questions that are necessary to get transparency on the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump in Butler, PA on July 13th. In this hearing, we will identify a lot of the actual failures, but I will be first to tell you that given the fact of the untimeliness and which point this has been conducted, you will see at this stage where I think that criminal gross negligence and purposeful intent will be indistinguishable. There was a lot of things that we can point to as critical failures. As the United States Congressman for Florida's 7th District, I had conducted at least 1,000 of these advances in my lifetime with regards to the State Department and others. And I can tell you, having worked on a counter-sniper team, having worked on an advance team, that there are critical failures that need to be identified so that the American people can understand the transparency of it, but also to raise the questions and awarenesses of why. That is the intent of this entire hearing, is to get to the why, get to those who are responsible, bearing in mind, responsibility and accountability are two very different things. This is not an I'm sorry, I'll resign, I'm finished. This is a get accountability to pursue either purposeful intent or criminal gross negligence. The questions that we have to ask is, why was a venue such as the one selected not having the adequate security? Why was the higher vantage points not covered? Why was there not a either comparable or compatible communications system or a joint operations center established? Where was the security plan, the comms plan, the data range cards? Where was the actual overwatch? Where was the ground teams as far as their rates of instruction? And what was the tactical techniques and procedures that were to be utilized that would identify and mitigate all the existing threats? I think that this is just the start as we continue to unpeel the layers and layers of why was there not an early morning briefing with all to ensure communications and last-minute security plans? Why was this surveillance drone not utilized, even though it was offered? And who ultimately is responsible and will be held accountable for one of the truly most life-changing incidents for a lot of us, where we almost lost the former president of the United States? I think that it's easy to see why an independent investigation is needed. I think that we understand that if this was to have been conducted correctly, then July 14th, we would have had immediate subpoena to get the security plans, comms plans, the motorcade operational plan, the actual counter-snipers range fan data cards, and started questioning the individuals independently to do corroborations of fact-fiction boards to see what's going on. But we hope with the continual failures within the federal government and the lack of transparency that's been provided to date, that this will help to be a benchmark of where we can move going forward to try and rebuild the confidence in your elected officials. That we will not hide behind low-level classifications, and that we will guarantee the transparency and accountability that the American people deserve. This panel that we have put together is also to acknowledge those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Today is August 26th, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our 13 fallen heroes in Afghanistan of August 26, 2021, and the sacrifice that's been made on behalf of a grateful nation. It's time for us to reflect on what the cost is of these freedoms, and I also want to acknowledge the service and the murder of Corey Commentator, and let his family know that we are here, we are listening, and that we will get accountability. I want to thank our members that are here as well, and I want to just end with this. While this is the first hearing of its kind to come together, it won't be the last. And that this is a message to all of Congress, that if we are not selecting people based on meritocracy, that independent investigations such as this will continue to move forward, that there are members and conservatives who will not be silenced, and that we will continue to strive for accountability in government, as well as for transparency for America. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my good friend and co-chair, the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming here today. Can you guys hear me in the back? Awesome. All right, I want to also acknowledge and thank my friend and colleague Bob Good for showing up today. It's been nearly a month and a half has passed since Matthew Crooks allegedly scaled a roof in plain sight with an AR-style rifle only 140 yards from where President Trump was standing. He was then able to fire off multiple rounds, tragically killing Corey Commentator while hitting President Trump within an inch of his life. That's a month and a half with frustratingly few answers and even less accountability for those who had a duty to protect President Trump. Many of the excuses that we've heard from those in leadership sound like hollow and pathetic attempts to gaslight the American people. This is also why Rep. Biggs and I have recently introduced legislation that would require the surrender of all Secret